A lot can change in a year, and I'm sure even more can change in 2 years. And what's the most important thing that's happened in these last 2 years since I was gone? That's right, DC screwed up the Injustice movie. Okay, I'm back from retirement, but only briefly. So let's talk about Injustice, the first comic series I've ever read in full, so obviously this story means a lot to me. In fact, there was one point in my channel's history where I was uploading nothing but Injustice coverage. I played both the games, read all 5 years of the comics, the annuals, the Zero Year Maxi series, the sequel comics, and yeah, even the Ground Zero tie-ins. And now, the Injustice movie. A movie I was really hyped for, and if you couldn't already guess by my intro, this was a huge disappointment. Now I know there are going to be some of you in the comments saying, "Aw, comics, your expectations were too high, you were asking for too much from this movie," and to those people, I'd just say, my expectations for this movie, despite being pretty high, were perfectly reasonable. The script for this story was written 8 years ago, and it was fantastic. All they had to do was take the already finished script and animate it, maybe cut some scenes down for time restraints, but besides that, it would have been a top-tier DC animated movie. But hey, what can you expect from the same people who butchered Batman Hush? Yep, that's right. Pointless changes, dumbing down of characters, a failed understanding of the original text, and a story that doesn't even resemble what it was supposed to be adapting. All we want to see is the original story told properly in animation. We've been telling you this since 2016, DC, and the sad part is, Killing Joke is probably the closest thing we've gotten to comic accuracy from these DC movies lately. Yep, you heard me right, Killing Joke, and that is how low the bar is, so no, my expectations were not too high. You know what, I've been spinning my wheels for a minute now, and I've been being really negative, but let's actually get into my problems with this movie. The first real red flag we get is when we first see the Flash in Metropolis as he runs into one of the Joker's traps.
I like it, cut G.
Let's call this the Dick Grayson effect, the moment in a story when a popular character gets killed or brutalized for absolutely no reason other than malice on the writer's part. Now you would be forgiven for thinking that this is just a setup for furthering the tragedy of the Metropolis incident soon to come. After all, the biggest superhero to die in the Metropolis incident in the comics was probably Beast Boy, so it's someone who's not really that closely related with most members of the League. Maybe that's why they killed Flash, but then again, that's probably not the case because as soon as Flash dies, nobody ever mentions him again. So at this point, it's clear to see that this is a standalone universe. It's not a prequel to the video game, because Flash is alive for the events of the video game, and he has an actual character arc in that. So yeah, all of Flash's character development throughout the comics, the games, you just throw that all away. Sort of give him the best costume in the entire movie, and then kill him in 15 seconds. And yeah, that's all we get of Flash. Barring how stupid this is, how does his death even make sense? Just because his legs can't move, he can't react at super speed, maybe like dodge under the blades? So yeah, Flash definitely gets a bad rap in this movie, and I think a lot of people are calling this movie out for that, among other things. But if you think Flash is the only leaguer who gets shafted in the story, then you're wrong, because Aquaman, Shazam, they get like one line of dialogue each that basically just amounts to them saying that they won't be in the movie anymore. And what a contribution those two made, honestly. And that's actually the same scene where Green Lantern writes himself out of the movie too and says he needs to go to Oa for some reason. So that's 3 Justice Leaguers just written out, well, 4 if you count Flash. And the regime doesn't even form properly in this movie. It doesn't really feel like the powerhouse it's supposed to be. It's just a handful of Leaguers, because most of the team either joins Batman or just recuses themselves from joining any team altogether. Now, everything I've said so far may have you believing that I hate everything there is about this movie, but believe it or not, it's not all that bad. There are some good scenes from this movie that can be enjoyed in isolation. There are some good scenes. Most of them are Nightwing scenes, but even then, I only give those credit mainly because they were lifted directly from the comic book. So yeah, surprise, surprise, the best thing about this movie was what they actually properly adapted from page to screen. You know, if only we could have an entire movie where it's a recreation of the comic to animation, and we would call it an adaptation. Crazy idea, I know, but It could work. Maybe DC should try it sometime.
They're exactly where you said they'd be. Protecting the monsters.
How the hell did you get here? No, really. Damian was in the Batcave when Batman and Nightwing took the jet to Arkham. How did he get there before them? Well before them, in fact. He had enough time to brief the regime on where they'd be standing. Now, something similar to this happens in the comic, except in the comic, Batman and Nightwing were already waiting for the regime. In this movie, they had only just arrived. Are we to assume Damian is a speedster?
I like it cut, G.
You know what? I don't care anymore. We're at that scene now. That scene that even the comic fans agree is terrible. So, let's see how this movie handles it. Remember how earlier in the video I mentioned something called the Dick Grayson effect? Well, strap yourselves in, because we're about to see how that trope got its namesake.
Hey, Robin doesn't punch people after they go fetal. You're not Robin, so shut up!
They made it worse. They took one of the worst death scenes in the history of comics, maybe all media even, and they made it even worse. How? By removing The Rock. Now, I know everyone uses The Rock as the scapegoat for how terrible this Nightwing death scene is, but realistically, it's the entire situation, not just The Rock, that was stupid. I personally would have much preferred it if Damian killed Dick on purpose, as it's implied in the original Injustice game, but if it must be an accident, it should have been something like done with a sword or a gun, or something believably lethal, not just a stick to the face and a rock to the neck. But like I said, The Rock is only in the comics. This movie makes it worse by removing The Rock, so it's just the stick and the fall that kills him. What is that thing made out of? How many people has Nightwing killed in this universe by using that stick as a projectile, like he often does in DC media? Do I have to explain why this is stupid? I think I've just spent the last minute explaining why it's stupid, but no, I think you guys get it. I think you guys get the point. Then about 2 minutes later, he gets resurrected as a ghost and turned into Deadwing. Wait, what? First of all, way to remove the tension relating to his death by immediately reviving him. Second, why are we bringing stuff from year 3 of the comics into this? You can't even tell the story of year 1 correctly, and now you're just skipping ahead 2 years to screw that stuff up as well? Also, the name Deadwing is something the fans came up with. We didn't think that you'd actually use it as his alias. It just kind of sounds a little bit stupid. But hey, I can live with that. Let's just talk about how this is a total Deus Ex Machina that came out of nowhere to save a main character. At least in the comics, there is setup for it. We see the original Deadman, Boston Brand, dying while on a mission aiding the insurgency, and as a final act, he's able to pick his successor, someone who he knows will aid the insurgency, and that is Dick Grayson. In the movie, it just comes out of nowhere, and I wish I could say that that's the worst of what they do with Deadwing, but it only goes downhill from here. And also, little nitpick, but why did they fuse the Disco Wing suit with the New 52 suit for this Deadwing costume? I know, little nitpick, but these things do add up. I'm just saying, the original design is way better. One thing that is better, however, and not a nitpick, is the chess scene from the comics. Yeah, not the movie. In the movie, the chess scene is terrible, which is saying something, because it was actually one of the best moments from the comic. For those unfamiliar, I'll explain what the chess scene is. It's a chess match between Flash and Superman. They're just sort of chilling out, playing dozens of rounds of chess per minute with their super speed, and Superman suggests the idea of the two of them using their speed to remove all the guns from the planet. And Superman's also on like a crazy winning streak at this point, and he's calling checkmate every few seconds. Flash disagrees with Superman and brings up how smoking kills more people than guns, so if they want to get rid of guns, they should also probably get rid of cigarettes. And then Flash's examples sort of become a little bit more extreme as the conversation moves on. He says something about killing people who don't recycle, and that sort of illustrates the point of how it's a slippery slope and how the League could be going down a very dark path if they remove all the guns from the planet. And during Flash's whole speech, he starts calling checkmate, and it's a pretty cool way of showing how Flash is now defeating Superman's arguments with his intellect, and he's also defeating him in the game. Superman doesn't respond to any of what Flash is saying, leaving us to infer that Superman, despite being a little bit more unhinged than usual in this universe, can still see the error in his thinking and that he knows when he's lost an argument. So, how does the movie screw it up? Well, first off, since Flash is dead in the movie, Superman has to square off against Mr. Terrific instead. So the whole concept of two speedsters playing chess at super speed is just completely lost now. Not to mention the fact that they only start playing chess when the conversation starts. Who starts a conversation and then immediately goes to multitask by playing chess? It just seems really weird. It would have been much more natural if the conversation would have just emerged during a game. But in the movie, Superman and Mr. Terrific just start talking and then immediately decide to play one 30-second game of chess for no reason at all. Terrific actually does bring up some of the same points that Flash does in the comics, but it falls on deaf ears because Superman decides to just lock Terrific in jail after this conversation, just because he knew he wouldn't help him with this plan. You know, one thing I've been seeing a lot more of is that people always complain that in Justice Superman went evil instantly after Lois died, which isn't the case at all. His madness grew slowly in stages, but now all the people who think that that's what Superman does in the comics, that he just instantly turns evil, they have more of a reason to back up their misunderstanding because this Superman in the movie is that evil Superman they described, who just turns evil instantly and doesn't have a single redeeming quality about him. And also, I don't want to forget that because Mr. Terrific isn't a speedster, he can't put Superman in checkmate every second like Flash did, so he's only able to put him in check after every turn, which is far less impressive. It's actually not uncommon to keep someone in check for a few moves. So yeah, they totally sucked the air out of that scene completely. I don't know, this seems to be a theme for the movie at this point. How much stuff from Injustice Year 1 can they cut out? Black Canary, Lex Luthor, Superman's infamous tweet, the 5U93R pills that make humans as strong as Kryptonians? That's all cut, which means Alfred dropping Superman was cut too. And it's not like they didn't have room for all those, because they kept reaching into other years of the storyline for more content to butcher. We've already seen this with Deadwing, but they also had to borrow a Plastic Man story from year 5 as well. Except this time, Plaz is breaking into prison to save Mr. Terrific instead of his own son. So yeah, Batman just tells Plastic Man to break out Mr. Terrific from an underwater facility without much of a plan at all, but luckily for them, Mr. Terrific just so happens to have a tattoo, which can be removed and turned into a bubble for him to survive the deep sea of water. Also luckily for them, this wasn't confiscated by the prison when he was arrested. How very convenient! Unfortunately for them, Cyborg arrives on the scene to stop the pair, except in comes Deadwing, who somehow knows about this plan going down. Deadwing possesses Cyborg and floods the facility, giving Terrific and Plaz the escape they need. And then Deadwing just leaves. Which means Cyborg has plenty of time to stop Plaz and Terrific, but he doesn't, because gotta love that convenience, but for real, Deadwing is an idiot for depossessing Cyborg when he was still a threat to the insurgents. And I may have missed it, but did they ever explain what became of the prisoners in the underwater prison? Did they just drown, or did the regime manage to save them? I mean, I don't want to watch the movie back, but I'm gonna assume that this wasn't addressed at all because, as we'll soon see, continuity doesn't matter in this universe. What do I mean by that? Well, let's fast forward to the scene where the insurgency breaks into Superman's fortress to steal a weapon. No, not the formula for the 5D93R pills like in the comics, just a weapon. I think they said it was the Phantom Zone projector, but it doesn't really matter. Superman arrives on the scene, but before he can do anything, it's revealed that the Atom has entered his brain with a shard of kryptonite. This weakens Superman and should keep him at bay while the insurgents retrieve the weapon. Except then Ra's al Ghul arrives on the scene. Yeah, he's in this movie too. Ra's gives Superman a toxin that is harmless to him, but will kill the Atom, who is still shrunken down inside his brain. As soon as Atom dies, Superman is back to normal again. Now, did anyone spot the plot hole? Just take a minute, pause the video if you need, maybe rewind the last 30 seconds or so, try to figure it out yourself, and yeah, try to find the plot hole. Are you back? Did you solve it? Okay, so the kryptonite shard is still in Superman's brain. The Atom wasn't the thing making Superman weak, it was the kryptonite, which is still in his brain. And good luck getting it out now that Atom's dead. But that doesn't matter, because the story treats Superman as if he's back to normal again. Like I said earlier, the script can't keep up continuity or object permanence to an item they just established existing 10 seconds ago. This is the type of writing I'd expect from Titans, not Injustice. Speaking of Titans, it's about that time again, because we're about to see the Dick Grayson effect in action yet again. Green Arrow dies. For no reason. He's just a victim of circumstance in this. He doesn't have a big heroic death like he did in the comics. He doesn't sacrifice himself for the super pill formula. He just gets flattened by Superman because of a series of unfortunate events. And nobody ever mourns his death, just like Flash. They make a joke about how he has a hole in his face 2 minutes later, but that's about it. I'd say Green Arrow probably got done even dirtier than Nightwing because at least Green Arrow had a heroic sacrifice in the Year One storyline, but not anymore. His death is just the butt of a joke now. But I guess that's what happens when you try to cram 7 years worth of storytelling into one 80-minute movie. Yeah, you heard me right, 7 years. They borrow from the first 5 years of the comics, as we've discussed earlier, plus the game, which is Year 6, and also the Ra's al Ghul and Amazo stuff from the Injustice 2 prequel comics, which is basically Year 7. While I'm on that subject, bringing Ra's into things, especially aligning him with Superman, causes a ton of issues. How come he doesn't just use the Lazarus Pit on Lois? Her body was intact, and even if it's been weeks since she's died, the pit would still work on her. Maybe that's why they killed off Flash. His time travel powers would cause the viewer to ask too many questions. Not like it's easy to ignore that, just by saying that this Flash can't use that power, or won't due to the consequences resulting in far worse effects. But maybe now I'm being too generous. No, they don't care about the audience asking questions like that, or they wouldn't have introduced Ra's al Ghul in this story as an ally to Superman. And we've seen their rock-solid continuity with the underwater prison not getting a mention, or Adam's nonsensical death scene, so I guess it's just like the movie to not address such questions. But we're almost done with Ra's anyways, so let's just get through it. Damian engages in a duel with his grandfather because Ra's Amazo project had more nefarious intentions than what Superman and the regime had signed on for. Then Deadwing pops up again and does the smart thing by possessing Ra's al Ghul so that his threat can be neutralized immediately. No, I'm just joking. That would actually make sense. Deadwing actually jumps into Damian's body to give him a nice little pep talk so that he can defeat Ra's. So, first of all, I'm sure just Dick's presence in his body... Okay, that sounds wrong. First of all, just Richard's presence in his body would be just enough to throw Damian off focus for when he was fighting Ra's. So that was a stupid move on Deadwing's part. And secondly, why didn't he just possess Ra's? It's not only the only smart move, but it's the only move Nightwing can make as a ghost. Now listen, I'm all for characters making improper choices and not doing the smart thing all the time, but this is brain dead easy. You have one move, literally one move, possess Ra's and have Damian knock him out, and you can still talk to him later. It's that simple. The fight can be over in 2 seconds, but no, this Nightwing is a complete and total moron. He's still the best character in the movie, and all of DC for that matter, but he's just a complete marshmallow brain for what he did, or rather didn't do, in this scene. And as always, I gotta blame the writers for this one. What makes this scene even worse is that this is one of the few new subplots added into the movie, like Adam with the kryptonite. And for both of them, they're just terribly written. Most of the story was written for you, and all this new stuff that they forced in is just pathetic in comparison. Even their evil Superman is terrible. He goes fully evil, way too fast, and then at the end of the movie, an alternate universe's Lois Lane pops in and tells him that he shouldn't kill, and he's all remorseful all of a sudden.
How did it come to this? I deserve death.
His anger went from 0 to 100 back down to 0 again after a pep talk. This Superman is not a well-written character. He's not believable in any way. This is not Injustice Superman. Injustice Superman would not be so easily convinced out of his mindset. So why did they try to aim for a happy ending? They have an M rating, and this is Injustice Year 1 that they're allegedly adapting. And no, you didn't mishear me earlier. They actually brought the multiverse into this. What's the setup for it? Just one line of dialogue from Mr. Terrific earlier, who said that he's observing other universes, which is a pretty lazy setup in my opinion, and that's not the same thing as actually having a dimension-hopping machine. This is basically an Injustice prequel, where the events of Injustice are said to have never taken place, so why even bother then? If this isn't even remotely canon to Injustice, why did you call this movie Injustice, and steal just enough plot beats for a remake to feel too repetitive. It can't be because of the brand recognition, because you were willing to release a Justice Society movie earlier this year, which was god-awful by the way, and that doesn't have any brand recognition either. Everything leads to nothing in this retelling. The deaths of Green Arrow, Nightwing, Flash, everyone just leads to Superman not being fully unhinged as the most tyrannical version of himself he can be. He doesn't really fully evolve into the High Counselor. Superman's reign was tame at best and only lasted a few weeks. Just for him to turn good at the end under the most unbelievable of circumstances, it all meant nothing. And that was the Injustice movie. The only DC animated movie I've been excited for in a long time. And what's left for DC animation at this point? Are they going to continue the Tomorrowverse? I hope not. The animation for that universe sucks, and the storytelling is even worse. Whether it's Batman letting a murderer get away scot-free, or Superman complimenting the Flash on killing Brainiac, it's clear to see that we are not in good hands when it comes to the future of DC animation. But I blame that on the fact that they release 4 movies a year now. Back when they released 2, you'd rarely, if ever, see a bad or even mediocre entry. When they bumped it up to 3, the quality started getting a little bit shakier. But now that there are 4 movies a year for the last few years, the quality has definitely nosedived. There hasn't been a single good DC animated movie all year. And in my opinion, I think they need to go back to making only 2 a year. I'd rather get 2 good movies a year than 4 shit ones, wouldn't you? And for the love of God, stop with the trend of changing iconic DC stories just for the sake of it. We want to see Batman Hush and Injustice, not your twisted fanfic idea of what those 2 movies could have been. These stories are iconic for a reason, and needlessly meddling with key parts of their stories will not make them better. And what else is there to look forward to? I mean, Titans is just about the worst thing DC's ever made. All the CW shows have been bad for more seasons that they've been good, and Crisis was the final nail in the coffin for that universe. Every time a new DC thing gets announced, I just worry, oh boy, how are they going to screw this one up? I guess most of all, I'm excited for the Gotham Knights game and the Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League game, especially because the latter is set in the Arkhamverse. And I just hope that we see those 2 turn out pretty well, because my interest in modern DC media is hanging on by a thread. I do like the new Nightwing comic run though, so hey, that's something. Anyways, that's all for now. I just wanted to come back out of YouTube retirement one last time because I based my entire channel around Injustice once, and I just felt like I wanted to chime in now that DC spat on one of my favorite toys. Gotta love DC, and I wonder what these next years will bring.
You don't get off that easy.